Sure. Okay. My name is Billy. I've been working in QA for it's been over a decade now, and actually, I'm quite honored and to be invited to teach you guys and show you a little bit more. Help you guys hopefully have a good career in QA. And in terms of background, I've worked for various companies, building their QA department from the ground up. I've built teams in the QA in the Los Angeles area, a couple of teams, mostly startups, e-commerce, but in several industries. I've been worked for fashion. I worked for automobile. I've done tech, so real estate. So, but mostly on the tech side. So that's my background. I don't have a pretty slide to show you, but today's lesson, hopefully you guys are aware that it's about QA interview questions and answers. And I have a slide here that I made, and hopefully we can go through this. Let me show you let me share my screen. A second here. All right, can you guys let me know if you can see the screen?
Yeah, we see everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is let's see. So this is going to be our agenda for today. Well, after the introduction, gonna do I have a couple of questions that you may see in a typical QA interview, and then we'll leave the last couple of 15 minutes or so for some any Q&A or any additional questions, or if you actually have gone to an interview and you asked and you don't still have any questions. Yeah, so you guys are ready. So here is the first question I have for you. What is the difference between QA and software testing?
Testing is just for find a bug. QA is process for make product better.
Okay, let's see. Can you say that again one more time, please?
Yeah, sure. Software testing, it's just you try find bug, you test product. QA is process which help make product is better. It's not just find bug, it's big process, big whole process.
Yeah, excellent
Testing,
answer.
it's just little part of QA.
That's excellent. That is correctly what. So QA or quality assurance is basically dealing with the quality of the process. So you're going to deal with test creation. So you write tests, right? You guys are writing test cases. You guys are going to deal with sprint planning, bug triage. Those are all of the processes that go with assurance of the quality. Whereas the software testing itself is the process of ensuring the functionality, right? So you're just testing the software itself and making sure that the bugs are being tracked and so forth, whereas QA is the process. Does anyone have any questions or?
No.
Okay. All right, so we'll go with the next one. What is the difference between a build and release number? Or can someone explain to me what is a build number and then what is a release number, and then we can talk about the difference.
Come on, guys, please talk. There is an interview question. On the interview, you will guys have no option to be silent. And interview just on the way, like in the next door. So if you want to pass the interview, please talk to us right now. That's the kind of interview, okay? Real one.
I guess build is a part of code which we work on inside company, and release is software is ready to delivery for customer, is provided for customer.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the company. I mean, that's a good answer. So here's the, so basically, in some companies, you could have a build number and it could be identical to the release number. Sometimes you can have a build within that is just only within the development team, and that's totally not what's being released. So, like if you're releasing something to the Apple Store, you may have release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but internally you can have, going through your cycles, you can have multiple iterations in an agile, right? So you can have a lot more builds, and especially if you're going to create bugs and then they're going to release more. So you can have different build numbers internally and externally. Um, so this one is, what does the test strategy include? Does anyone know what a test strategy is?
It's understanding what you should testing, how you will do it, test plan, test cases, something like this one.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything
It's
they want to?
it's include maybe gathering information, asking the questions, reading requirements, specification, documentation, and writing test plans, checklist for part of the software according the documents and requirements, I guess. Or
I think it's a sequence of testing that will be performed.
Well, I mean, basically, I mean, if you just look at the word strategy, it's basically what is a QA's plan on how they're going to approach and enforce the QA, right? So basically, we're talking about from a QA perspective, we're saying what is QA going to do, and what is our plan of attack on how we're going to strategize and test it, right? So, um, does anyone else want to put in, or do you guys want to see the answer?
Yeah, test strategy is a high-level document. It captures the approach on how we go about testing the product and achieve the goals.
What's the goal?
To make our product,
Bug-free application.
yeah, bug-free application, successful.
Is it mean it's the same as a test plan, test strategy, or it's a different?
It's different.
So it depends on I mean, from my experience, it depends on the company. Some companies use test plan and test strategy um, as the same definition. But test strategy would be, let's say if you have um, multiple projects and multiple things that you need to QA, and the strategy would be the overarching strategy, and the plan is specifically for dealing with each specific application that you're going to test. So what I have here is, so basically it talks about an introduction. So you're going to introduce what is the QA approach, any resources that you're going to have. You can talk about, this is our team. We have, 5 QA manual testers. The scope can talk about, um, what are we going to test? Are we going to test on the website? Are we going to test on mobile? And then schedule for that. So you can talk about saying, hey, we're going to need X number of durations or X number of sprints in order to complete our test activities. And then test tools would be pretty much reiterating the stack that you're using, Jira, um, whatever tools that you need in terms of um, anything that's included, i.e., like if you need to test on devices, you need to have specify that. And then there's the priorities. So you say, hey, we want to test if there's any priorities in terms of testing and then planning and so forth. I think there is, okay, there is have a link for Test Guru or something that gives you an example test strategy. I'll put it in the Slack channel after, and you guys can take a look at that as a sample. But yeah, those are pretty good answers. Just take a look at that, review that. That's I think in one of the other things they said that they may or may not ask too much about this, but it's always good to know a little bit more from the high level so that you can talk about that. Any questions or anything confusing or?
No question, everything clear.
Okay, so here's the next question. What is a test case? I'm sure everyone's going to have an answer for this one, right?
Test case, it's a list of steps for reproduce something, reproduce if you have bug, reproduce bug, or happy pass. Well, actually, it's list of steps.
Well, it's not technically reproducing the bug. It's a set of direction with the goal of test certain functionality or a certain part of web application or any application. Really.
So would you say a bug ticket is the same as a test case?
No, I'm not saying.
No, don't say.
The test case and a bug report, I think it's a different thing. Test case is the goal of test case is to determine the functionality of certain feature, right? And the bug is particularly like a report of the certain error of the web application.
Okay, I guess what I was kind of ascertaining or trying to understand is that in terms of formatting, you would just say, hey, this is, you in terms of test case, you have very specific steps that you need to duplicate, and then you have expected results, right? So that would be the similarity between a bug and a test case. So basically, the test case is a specific condition to check against the application of the test, and it has information about what environment you're going to be running it against, any prerequisites that you're going to need. Go ahead.
To verify.
Yeah, so basically, if you have prerequisites, they're usually called test setups. Sorry, was that a question? Okay. Yeah, and so basically, you would say, which environment you're going to test it under, the prerequisites. So you say, hey, if I need to have an existing user, or if I need to have, something in the database for this test case to be completed, and then you would list, as you said, the executable test steps, and then your verification steps. And of course, it's going to be a little different when you're doing a manual test case writing versus an automation test case writing. So just a little heads up on that. So see if they don't confuse you on that. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the answer?
No, it's clear.
Okay.
No
Okay.
questions.
I have one kind of a comment about that. When I was going through the interview, they actually asked me two questions. First was, what is the test case? And the second one, what does the test case consist of? Like right now, it looks like the questions are put together, like those two questions put together, like you explaining right in here what test cases consist of. That's why I kind of didn't get an answer. Right.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to hear that, these are, I mean, for a manual, what you guys are looking for, this would be, very typical or standard test, interview question. So, that's good. So let's go to, and I think we also, we typically provide the PowerPoint presentation at the end. So, if you guys need to go back and look at this, that'll be out there in the Slack channel as well. Okay, explain the steps for bug cycle.
To find the bug first.
Then
To find the bug, you report it, you fix it, and you test it.
Okay, pretty simple. Anyone want to expand on that?
You need to find a bug to send it back to developer. Developer has to fix it and to return it to QA. And you need to check it again. And if it is not fixed, you need to return it to back to dev, and he need to fix it and return it to you back.
Yeah, that's a more complete answer. Anyone have anything else to say?
No.
All right, so let's take a look at, this is kind of, once a bug is identified by the tester, it's assigned to the development manager in open status. If the bug is a valid defect, then it will put into, you guys, part of the triage, right? You guys remember that you guys will do a triage, hopefully, for your company. And so you guys will put it in either the backlog or upcoming sprints. And, when you triage questions, right? Priority, severity, and that will be if it's valid. Another thing is if the bug is not valid and they deem it to be, they can reject it, right? Other part is, like I said, is whether it's in scope. If it's not part of the current, then defects are postponed. Again, if it's erased, if it's duplicate. So one of the things that you always want to make sure is, depending on your team size, right? I mean, if you have a small team, you should have less duplicate bugs. It's one of those things where it gives greater confidence to the QA team when you're not finding tons of duplicate bugs, right? Because if you and your team, open up 10 bugs, but 5 of them are duplicate, it makes it go, okay, what is the QA team doing? And so what we have is have a little. This one I saved it apparently. So then another way is, like he was saying, oops, let's see. So here's a little bit more of a visual representation. So you can have, if you have a new status, you can have it, during the triage, you can reject it. If not, you can keep it open. And then it can go into deferred, or it can go into the backlog status, right? And then if they decide to, the development team's going to work on it. Can you guys see my browser? Just to make sure.
No, we still see the
Oh, okay. All right, hold on. Let me go into. Let me move this over. How do I move this? Okay. Okay, can you guys see the slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry. First time doing this, so hard to see. Okay, so like we said, as a QA tester, you open up a new bug, and then in the triage, you guys can decide whether it's rejected, if it's duplicate, or if it's just something that there's another, sometimes in Jira, there's a status called won't fix or will not fix. So that's where development or product will, in the triage will say, you know what, that's a great bug you found, but we're going to not fix it. It's not something that we're going to fix at all. So that's one of the reasons that they may get. So you might hear that a lot. And if they say, you know what, we're going to accept this bug, but we're going to go ahead and put it into deferred status, which means they're going to put it into the backlog, or it's on the, some companies call it back burner in terms of reference to stoves. They just put on the back burner. It's kind of, it's an issue. You guys caught it, good, but it's not of a high priority or so forth. So, that's where it's going to be. As someone mentioned, that if the development team does accept it, then they'll work on it and fix it, and then this is where QA will come back. Can you guys see my mouse, just so I'm sure?
Yes.
Okay, so this is where, as you said, you will come in, the QA will say, hey, once the sprint is in progress and the development team has fixed the bug and it comes back to QA, this is where you can retest. And then you have several options. You can, depending on your company and how they set up Jira or your workflow, you can, of course, easiest to reopen and say, hey, send it back to developer and then have it back and for them to fix it within the sprint. Or depending on the timeline of where you are in the sprint, it can be pushed to the next sprint. And then some companies will let you close it, or they'll close it once the release has gone live. So this I feel is a little easier to visually understand, but again, you can have different steps, and one of the things that you might or might not experience when you come into a new QA team is, they may not have this all set up. So you might have to explain to them, like how to work out the flow, and it depends on the company. But hopefully you guys will join a company that has, a robust QA team. So you're just joining in, and then, the process should be pretty simple for that. Let me change the slide.
I have a question, like what is going to happen with these rejected bugs? Are they going to be closed like by the end of the sprint, or like what is their story?
So it depends on the company's process. If it's a won't fix, usually right then and there when you're doing the bug triage, they'll say, okay, you know what, Natasha, you found a great bug, but it's low priority or it's too complex. We're just going to close out the ticket right then.
Okay.
So they'll just change. So in the tool, they'll say, they'll give it a label or something that says won't fix, and then they'll go ahead and close a ticket, or one of the things that you can also do is you can, when you find duplicate stuff is, you can say, you can say mark it as duplicate, and rejected always not necessarily means like a bad scenario. Let's say you find 2 separate bugs, but you don't realize on the development side that they can be fixed by one one code, right? So if the developer says, hey, I'm working on this part of the application and it fixes both of these bugs, so the company will then take the the Jira or whatever bug tracking system and say, okay, usually you can go in and link them together and then say, okay, this is closed because it got fixed in something else. So it's not necessarily always a bad thing, but so another form of duplicate tickets, but so you'll experience that a lot as well. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
That was a good question. I like that. Yeah. Anything else or? Okay, let me go in and go back to the slide here. Okay, so I mean this is same thing, just visually represented. So another question I would ask is, what type of testing do you perform?
Functional testing.
Functional testing. So usually those are going to be like, if someone answers that, I would say, okay, I'll write it down and I'll ask them to explain that. But that's one. Is there anything else that you guys tested?
Mock testing and regression testing.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Mock testing and regression testing.
Mock, regression, sanity testing, it's everything.
Mock.
Okay.
We also tested API and databases. We didn't test databases, but we used SQL queries to check the integrity of data.
Okay, so API testing is good. So how would you answer, or how would you reword that if you said you did database testing? What's another way of saying that, I guess?
Backend testing.
Functional test or non-functional testing?
So you can say the back end is good. You can say there's also another type. You can say end-to-end testing, right? The end-to-end means you did the front and tested and make sure all the way the end, right? Does that make sense?
Black box testing?
Black box testing is good. Yes, you guys said black box testing. And just be aware, like I said, if you answer that, I might follow up and ask, what does black box testing mean? Or so make sure that you understand what those mean. Any other type of testing you guys did during the?
UI testing or front-end test.
UI, okay.
Acceptance criteria testing.
Okay.
I mean, we did a little bit of, I mean, really basic, I guess, security testing just to make sure that like authorization of certain users on a certain parts of the web application. And I guess we also did, well, if you consider, I don't know if you consider it performance testing when you check like size of the certain files if you upload something, and you check if it's I guess it's functional testing, right? If certain forms accept certain like extensions of the files and certain sizes of the files. Performance, it's more about you know, the amount of users and amount of requests, right? So it's not necessarily performance when you test what kind of files application can accept. I guess, is this correct?
Yeah. So performance has a lot more complexity. I would try to stay away from performance testing or any kind of security testing, because those would be that's a lot more complex. And I would I don't want to confuse you guys, but yeah. So performance testing is you're testing if you spin up your database and you say, hey, how many concurrent users can we bring that's on the website, right? Back in, if we do a lot of queries to the database, a lot of read writes to the database, can it handle it? A lot of that is now changed a little bit because of the microservices implementation by most companies. But if you have a company that has this, one database in the back, then that's the kind of performance testing. Not to get you guys confused, but I would stick with the basic ones that you guys did, saying, start out with, I didn't hear anyone, I think I heard someone say smoke testing, right? I think I heard someone say that. So smoke testing is very good thing to start with. So I would start with kind of like if you're doing your testing, like a top-down design, right? So you start with, hey, here is my smoke testing, and in there I did my functional and regressional testing, and some integration testing, which is typically what I do with my black box testing, right? So kind of go from top down as an approach. But I mean, if I ask this question, I don't care which order I get it, so you can say it whichever order you want. But be aware that if you mention it and you say you did performance testing, I may ask you more about it, because from a manual tester, you don't usually do that too much. So just to be aware. Any questions, or can I move on?
Yeah, you can move. Just one little note. Maybe in our case, will be better last point, white box change for gray box. It will be more correct for us.
For you guys? Okay. I mean, this is just more like, since I didn't teach you guys from the beginning, I'm not really sure specifically of what level of testing you did, but it's always good to know, worst case scenario, I would always say, you did black box testing, right? So that's the easiest. If you know the difference between gray and white, then it's even better. So, but yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Billy. Come on, guys. You didn't test the code. It's not really true. You check it, everything like with automation using the JavaScript. So that's definitely already white box. If you definitely created automation smoke test cases, how you did it without using the code.
Well, anyway, we touch very briefly automation.
So do you remember, guys, the configuration file and all other like files with the commands, which include JavaScript that.js? So that's the kind of already white. So,
Yeah,
or for example, you guys, if you were executing a command in a browser console using JavaScript command, that's the also white box testing. If you're, for example, asking the browser using JavaScript command to perform any action, that's the white box testing already. So if you feel free to answer this question based on your automation project, you can say white box. If you, as like for now, not feel free to like really comfortable to answer this question. So like, yeah, so Billy in this case is totally correct. Like black box, yeah, not white. But I hope, guys, after like smoke automation, you feel more comfortable. I hope. That's my hope.
Well, I mean, it's a great starting point. I mean, it's always, black boxes would be the main, what I would expect. So, I mean, if you're very strong in that, it's for your first position, it'll be great. I mean, as you work in the industry and learn, hopefully you'll pick up, become at some point be a white box tester. So, but like I said, so normally if I ask you what type of testing you've done and you answered, oh, I did this type of testing, then I would follow up and ask you. So hopefully this is an easy question. What is smoke testing?
Testing for to check for testing major functionality.
yeah, critical functionality of the web application.
Okay. Any more answers?
To check if the build is stable or not.
Okay.
Test the main ID of application.
Okay. That's part of that. Okay. So this is what the wiki definition is. It's smoke testing is preliminary testing to reveal simple failures enough to reject a software release. So some companies, not that many companies that I work for will let you reject it based on smoke testing failures. But so basically part of it is going through main core functionalities, going through most of those happy paths. Basically, if you run a subset of your regression tests that can be run in a short amount of time that tests major core functionalities of your application, that's the definition of smoke testing. So if you have, for example, let's just say Amazon.com, one of the simple smoke tests would be, can I open up the website? Can I hit the main page? Can I click on a category and add an item to my shopping cart and can I check out? So, so same thing with like a bank website. Can I hit the URL? Can I log in? Can I see my account? Those are basic functionalities that you would be able to an application. So that's part of it. So usually it's more of get a release and you do a quick smoke test and you say, okay, this looks good. But it's basically doing preliminary testing to make sure that build is pretty good. So all right, any questions on that or? No. Okay.
No, pretty clear.
Okay. I'm not sure. Have you done boundary testing? And if so, what would be the definition?
Never heard about it.
Boundary, it's testing, and when you test minimum and maximum and one extra.
What's the one extra?
So like, I don't know, for example, like stapler. Stapler can staple 10 papers of paper. 10 papers. You just take 1, take 10, and take 11.
Okay. Anyone else want to? Well, I mean, it's hard. I guess it's hard if you've never done boundary testing.
No, we did boundary test, and I'm just trying to come up with a definition. So it's a testing of the extreme extreme inputs in a either extremely low or extremely high inputs on a certain fields, or for example, if the zip code field only supposed to have like 5 digits, what would it be? What would happen if you put 6 digits or 4 digits? Like that's kind of as I understand is boundary testing.
Yeah, that's part of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and give you the answer, and I'll give you some. So boundaries testing is the process of testing between the boundaries, right? The extreme ends between partitions of input value. So it's like if you said, like you said, with a zip code, right? So you said, hey, this is my minimum, here's my maximum. So you know that zip codes wouldn't be anything less than 0000, right? 5 digits, and it shouldn't be more than, right? So like you said, you would try, I guess the easiest answer would be if you're trying to have an input field and the values only accept 1 to 10. So part of it is you would test below 1, right? So any value below 1 and any value between 1, lower value and upper value. So any number between 1 and 10. And then you would also do the 10, that's the maximum. And then a number outside of that maximum, right? As an example. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of like, and it's going to help a lot because when you have a lot of input fields, you want to make sure that called, I think it's called data partitioning, if I remember correctly. I forgot the terminology, but it's basically then you don't have to sit there and say, I'm going to put in all the values 1 through 10 and test 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, right? So you can just say, hey, what are my boundaries so that I can test extremes, both sides, and the actual boundary of those values, and then something in the middle. So that. So, and usually an example that I usually, well, I mean, real world scenarios, if I have that situation, as you start testing the functionality, you can use certain values. And then when you come into regression testing, you can change some of those values just to make sure that you are not running the same test. But that's up to you guys. I mean, as long as you're testing the boundaries, that's okay. It also depends on your company. If they want to keep consistent data sets, then you don't want to be changing those. You can say, my first pass, I use these values, and then second pass, I use the exact same values. So that way you know that things haven't changed. As long as you're testing the boundaries, the extreme ends, that should be okay. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next slide. Okay. Oh, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. So what are the contents? So I guess one of you guys asked before, what was the contents of a test plan and test cases, right? We talked about test cases already. So a little bit more about what is a test plan.
It's the scope of the project. So what it has to be inside. So what is outside of the project. So what kind of type of testing we are gonna, what we are gonna do, and about so what tools which we are gonna to use, something like this.
It's almost the same that was in the test strategy. The way how the test plan was actually explained to us, it will actually contain the scope, the responsibilities, what kind of types of testing would be performed. But test plans also could be like, you can write a test plan for just a sprint, just the way how you approach testing certain functionality. Like at some places it could be just a checklist, like you'll test this, and I mean, could be, I guess there are different types of test plans.
And there has to be a design. For example, what kind of database you're going to use, something like this. I mean, in design.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, so test plan and test strategy is very similar. Test strategy is more of a high level, and test plan is getting very specific about that, right? So let's take a look. So we're going to talk about, like you said, objectives, what's the scope, testing frame, environment that's going to be required. So it's kind of very similar to strategy, but strategy is more of a higher level, and test plan would be very specific in terms of this is what we're going to. It's kind of very similar, but it's getting very specific in terms of approach. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because as you see, we have reasons for testing, we have the criteria for exit and exit, we have deliverables, and then this is where we're going to talk about risk factors, right? So we want to try to educate the product and other teams as to what are the risk factors. You can also you can have a lot of the same duplicated in test strategy, right? So it's not to say that they won't, but any questions or? Okay, so does anyone know what a use case is and what it includes?
I was about to ask specifically about use case today.
Okay,
I came across on Google and I'm like, did we go over it or not? So yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, you Googled it. What do you understand it to be then?
A use case is a document that describes the user action and system response for a particular functionality. That's it.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so I mean, if you guys didn't use use cases or understand, then it would make sense as you don't understand it. So let's go and take a look. A use case is a document that describes the user action, system response, as Talia said, right? So that is known as a use case. Basically, a product or business owner will say, I want to be able to pick a blue car. That's my use case, right? Just basically saying, as a user of the application, I just want to be able to pick a blue car. That's all that it's saying. So from there, that's when you can say, this is what the business is saying. It doesn't give you any technical backend, right? Which normally it's going to be product, or usually someone that's on the business side that's going to be writing these use cases. And so you will have a lot of interaction with product or business, asking them, hey, this is the use case you wrote. You can ask them questions like, well, you said the user wants to pick out a blue car. Can they pick out a blue and red car, or can they only pick a blue car? So usually that's a good part of the QA process. You can take a look at the use case and ask the business and say, hey, that's because you're going to sit there and look at the use case or the JIRA or whatever ticket that comes to QA and say, okay, I need to start writing my test cases, right? So you understand what is the user going to do, right? It describes how they're going to use the application. So if I sit at my desk and I hit Amazon.com, I want to be able to add an item to the shopping cart, right? That's the use case. So you would have to test that. And then you can derive your test cases from there. Does that make sense? Or
So pretty much use case is the same as a test case, just without expected and actual results, correct?
well, use case, so test cases will be derived from the use case, but you can have multiple test cases from one use case. So let me think of an example here. Okay, so if we said, I want to be able to, all right, give me a second to think of a good,
I can give you an example. User should be able to pay with a card. That's a use case. And the test case, pay with a Visa card or pay with a MasterCard card.
exactly, yeah. So you can, or you can say, I can pay with a debit card, right? So that's where you as a QA professional will say, okay, I have a use case. How many test cases, right? So you have to say, here's a happy path. So you write your, when you start writing your test case, you say, here's a happy path, here's a negative path, and then part of that is when you integrate it with other parts of the application, say, well, okay, if I give it, a bad credit card, use a bad card, what should the error message be? And sometimes the business doesn't think about that. So, but yeah, that's basically what a use case is. Say, how can a user use the application and what should their response be? And then you then can derive or build all your test cases from there. But that was a pretty good example. Anyone have any other questions or have another?
Can you come up with another example?
So, if I want to use, as a user, I want to be able to use the window. So you say, well, does the window, as a test case, you can say, does the window open and close? Does the window open up? Does the window open down? Which way should the window move, right? Because if you're talking about our car window, it's going up and down. If you're talking about a house window, it can open in or out or up and down, right? So the business owner may say, I want to use a window. As a user, I want to be able to open the window. That's all the use case can be.
Can I say, I just to ask, for example, I can ask, can you maybe a little bit more specific? Just for example, he said MasterCard, and I don't know what he means. So I just want to gather as much requirements, specification as possible. And I start asking questions. So what kind of cards do you want to be present? So yeah, I just want to say that I need to ask more questions to get more answers. So
yeah, that's part of the QA process, right? Because business is not going to think of all your test cases. They just want to know how to use the application and what should the system behave. They may not think of all the scenarios. So that's part of what the QA should ask. So when you are in the sprint planning or kickoff and you look at the tickets and the ticket has a use case written by business, and that's when you'd ask the questions. You're sitting in the meeting, you guys are doing your estimations, right? And you look at the ticket and you say, okay, that's your time to ask questions. You ask for clarity. You ask for, okay, so this is what the use case is. Is this one type of behavior? Is this what's going to happen? Can I expect this? Should it do this? So those are all the types of things that you want to, the QA professional, ask them. Say what, and because what the use cases is going to be very loosely defined. It's just have user action and a response. So you would want to, it's not going to give you a lot of specifics, right? Because like you said, use case will say, as a user, I want to be able to use a card. Then you have to ask the questions. Should it take a credit card? Should it take a debit card? Should it take a MasterCard? Should it take a Visa card? Those are things that you need to find out and make sure that should the application take it, and then you write the test cases for it. Right? So those are the questions that you need to ask to define the use case so that it's usable from a QA perspective. So business says, oh, I just want to be able to use a card. That's all that they're going to ask for. You have to figure out, okay, what type of card should they use it, and how will it work with the rest of the application? If business says we should accept Visa card, but we don't accept Visa, then is that a change in the application? So those are things that you'll learn as you're on the job and you learn the application. So it's not necessarily something that you need to know right away, but it's just things. Does that answer your question, or?
Yes.
And I have a question just to understand. So use case, basically, it's like on the beginning of the, building the product, right? It's kind of because it says a use case is a document that describes the user action.
Yeah.
So for example, like a product owner came in and he said okay, I want to sell 1,000 pizzas, for example, delivery, I don't know, different states. And one of the use cases would be, you can order it, pay a credit card and stuff like that. So it'll be on the beginning.
Yeah, it's like a use case is it's more like it's like a template for something that they want, right? It's like, I want a car, or I want to be able to go to the dealership and buy a car. It doesn't really give you more. That's where you would have to ask the questions and ask them, what type of dealership, what type of car. So when you write your test case, you know what your expected inputs are and what your outputs are, right? If you don't know that, that's what you need to find out. So, like you said, it's just a template of what they're going to ask for and how the system should respond.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's try to. I have a lot more questions. I can put more on there, but have you guys done a bug triage?
Well, that's when you decide how critical is the bug, right? And how do you proceed with the bug? Should it be fixed immediately, or should it be should it be postponed? Is it critical bug that doesn't let you cannot go ahead with release because the critical functions are affected, or you can proceed with release and fix the bug afterwards? I assume that's where all these decisions are made.
Yes, that's we talked about that earlier. So it's basically part of the triage is a process. You make sure that you verify the bug. You make sure it's complete, right? So if you write a bug ticket and it's incomplete, it's going to create frustration and headaches for everyone, right? So you want to make sure. One of the things will be product will look at it and say, okay, is it complete? Do they understand the bug, right? Do you want to understand? They want to understand. So you said, hey, I found something. This is where they try to understand what you're trying to say. So if you're working with, multiple teams, they want to make sure that it's getting to the right team, right? So you have to understand what you're reporting. And like you said, it moves the bug to the sprint or backlog, and then we can adjust the severity and the priority appropriately. Right? So pretty, let's see. I think you guys did a test matrix, right? Or did you guys not? Did you guys do a test metric?
No, not me.
No. Okay.
Billy, that was actually questions from the student, so please explain to the student what does a test matrix means. That's why test metric, and then definitely test matrix, please. Okay, that was a question from the student.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so test metrics is something that you would use for reporting. So it's a standard, right? So you basically say so metrics is like a report. Just think of it like a test report. What are the tests that you ran? So you basically say, here's a total number of manual tests. Took QA 2.5 days to run those. We have 100 tests. Took QA 2.5 days to run 100 tests. Out of the 100 tests, 95 passed, 5 failed. We opened up 5 bugs. Or say there's 100 tests, but we couldn't test the credit card. The credit card ties into another part of the application that hasn't been built. So we had to wait for that. And then we could say how many times we ran it. So we could say, usually in a 2-week sprint, you may not have many iterations or runs of regression. So you can say, okay, in this sprint, we ran 1 complete regression, or if you have a combination of automation and manual, you can say, okay, we ran the regression 1 time with automation and we ran it 1 time manual. So this is kind of more of a high level. It depends on how big team structure is. If you're the only QA person, then you would have to explain metrics to manager or a lead or someone, usually development manager, maybe QA manager or someone. But this would be more like something. So it's basically a metrics. And you wanted me to explain something else, Marina?
Sorry, I just was muted. No, that's exactly what I want, because that's the common interview question. And next one was test matrix.
Oh, test matrix.
Yeah.
So test matrix is more of a map in terms of, so like for me, if I had, the matrix is more of, it's like a representation of the data that you're going to run. So if I said, I have to run this in, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. That's my test matrix. If I have, for example, if I have to run it with, so here's my test case. So if I said, I have to test a new application and I have several scenarios. Let's say I am writing into, so here's I guess this is a better situation. So if I'm running a test case and I'm saying login, right? So my test matrix could look like, do I have can I log in with a valid user? Can I log in with an invalid user? If I log in with a valid user, so those are kind of test matrix. So those are kind of like the logic path that you can go through. So if I said, hey, so one of the things that I do is I write it out and say, if I need to run those situations, I want to make sure that I don't forget. So I put it in a matrix so that it's a visual representation of work that I need to do. So let's say if I need to, I'll give you a better, maybe a little bit more clear example is, let's say I need to, go to Amazon and I need to pick up an item. I have 2 items. I have to pick up a red item and a blue item, right? So we know that, okay, I'm a logged in user. I have 2 items, red and blue. Now, that's very simple if you have 1 browser. Let's say I have to run it against 3 browsers and an iPad and a device. Well, I write the test matrix out so that I can say, kind of like a little Excel spreadsheet or something like that, where I say, okay, here's my data, and here are the sets that I have to run. So I would make sure that I have, red and blue, and I have, all of my browsers listed out, right? So that would be a good, let me put in here test matrix. And let me find something that would help. I think visually that might be better. But does that explanation kind of make sense? Oh, I see some chats. Sorry, I'm not. Okay. Okay.
Shakeout testing? Wow, Natalia, such an interesting question. I will Google it. I never heard about this one. Billy, what about you? Never, even never.
Yeah, I never heard of shakeout. I guess it's. I mean, everything about like testing is kind of like an analogy of actions, right? So like when we say smoke is kind of like, you know, if you plug in an appliance, does this, and you turn it on, does the thing start smoking? Does the thing function, right? So shakeout is kind of like like the action of actually shaking stuff out and seeing where things fall out. I don't think I've ever used it anywhere. So like you said, I would probably Google it, but let me get you a test matrix. Yeah, I've never used shake.
Well, at first I thought it was some kind of like a smoke testing. It just like I just found out there's so many names for testing that, you know, I didn't even hear about.
Yeah, so shakeout is kind of like if you have like a so like I guess the best thing is like if you have a plate of like a strainer of pasta, shake it, right? See what falls out. That's kind of the shakeout. I'm assuming that's the method. That's the method. That's the testing type. So you say, okay, here I have an item. I'm going to shake it and see what falls out. That's what you're going to do with the shakeout testing. But I don't think I've ever asked anyone that, or I have.
Okay, so in your like in real life, you and Marina, you didn't come across to shakeout testings at all?
No, never.
Basically, it says this test is basically carried out to check the networking facility, database connectivity, and the integration of models. The configuration management team who prepare builds for test environments normally does this test. So they also test whether the major components of the software are not broken.
Well, I mean,
this test done before the build is deployed in the test environment. After the shakeout testing, the next step is smoke testing, which is done by the testers. So basically, it looks like the shakeout test done by, you know, the higher
developers. No,
developers.
no, my devs never, like in all my experience, like
because
any devs.
The next step is smoke testing.
No, I never heard about this one. Actually, maybe I will ask actually my devs just in case to confirm. Maybe some of them like using this one. I will ask definitely like tomorrow because it's interesting for me. But no, unfortunately, or maybe for my happies, I like. Yeah, I never heard about this one. So never heard this question as an interview question. So. As it is, yeah, guys. Also, like Billy, we already almost
Billy says that he wants to show us something about.
Yeah, that's why you got. Yeah, that's why, guys. Let Billy show the test matrix, and I will provide after the class presentation with interview question and answer. And also, if you think you have some questions like to ask to Billy related to the interview, please post in general channel or no in Ask Me Here channel. So we will be checking and we will give you a response. Okay. So Billy, please go ahead and show the test matrix. Okay.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and provide a test matrix. I put that in the slide here so I can get you something. But that's pretty much it, because basically if you have multiple scenarios and you're running them repeatedly and you're running it through different different situations, like i.e. different browsers, right? So if you're running, so basically the test matrix, I build it so that I don't forget something, so that I can always, and it's also repeated. So like if I run through it, I build it one time, and then each time I go through that pass again, I'm using the exact same test matrix so that it's very well defined as to what my tests are and what I'm running it again, so that it's very clear. Someone asked me, okay, well, you know, I ran it against this and this. But let me get you something visual that might help you to understand that. So, should we continue, or do you want me to stop here right now, or?
Billy, if you have a visual example, it would be nice to show to students. Like that will be perfect.
Yeah, I don't have one right now, so let me.
Okay.
Let me find something on. Yeah, let me find something and then I'll post it. I will either attach it in the link right here.
Okay, guys, maybe right now any like emergency questions to the Billy, like related to the interview or something else like you want to ask right now. Yeah, please go and proceed with the questions.
Billy, I like this kind of questions. What is a red flags question, for example? So what is irritate you the most? So what kind of questions I don't need to ask? So do you have a red flag question?
Huh, do I have a red flag question? I personally don't have any red flags in terms of questions. I think my biggest red flag is when I look at someone's resume and it doesn't seem like the information adds up in terms of what they so like if you say something and it doesn't match up with what your resume says, that's kind of a flag for me. Other question would be well, so maybe I do have some. Maybe if someone asks me something and they're not paying attention, and I answered it and they didn't pay attention, so I have to repeat it again. Other types I had is not necessarily questions, but if I ask them to show me something, so um, no, or oh yes, okay. So it's been a while since I had an interview, so let me do so your big flag. One of the things this problem is from I don't know what's going on in your head. Meaning, like if I ask you a question and you don't answer, you don't respond. It's very hard for me to understand your logic or what you're thinking. So like I'm not sure if someone has asked you, said, oh, here's an item, and you give me the number of test cases, and you're just quiet. I can't understand what you're thinking. Or if you or if I ask you a question and you're stuck, you don't ask me. So one of the things about QA is communication and talking and asking questions for clarification, right? So if I ask you something and you're confused, and I know you're confused, but you don't ask me any questions back, it makes me feel like that's a kind of QA person you will be. You would get confused and not ask anyone for help or ask questions, which is not a very good sign for a QA person, right?
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I ask one question? What kind of tool we use for performance testing?
What tools have I used?
For performance test.
So the tools that I've used Load Runner. I'm not sure if it's called Load Runner anymore, but it's basically a performance testing tool. You basically can simulate network and other types of bandwidth conditions. So specifically, what we did was at Toyota, we basically said, we said, here's our test plan. We're going to start out with X number of users. We're going to do these specific test steps, and then we're going to go ahead and execute them. And then what we do is we measure. So using Load Runner, we basically create a load on the system, and then we measure bandwidth in terms of and then we create a baseline for those tests, and then we'll start incrementing it, and depending on what type of performance we want to test, the database read write. So basically, we use Load Runner. That's the tool that we use. It will create a lot of load on the entire architecture from front to back end. It'll test stress on the web server, um, the database, network. So those are things that you're looking at on the performance testing. So
there is also JMeter. That's the one that I kind of looked into, but just briefly.
Yeah, I mean, JMeter is an open source. It's good. It uses JVM. I have never used JMeter, but it's one of the things. It's hard to build and ramp up on your own device. You need a lot of memory and how many threads and so forth. But it's been years since I did any performance testing. As a manual QA, I haven't had to do too much performance testing. So as you get more into the QA engineer role, you may do a little bit more, but performance testing is not something that I've done a lot of in manual perspective side. So.
Okay, guys, so let's wrap it up for today. So I already posted in general channel presentation with interview question and answer. So please check it. And if any feedback, also your feedback is always welcome, as you know. And yeah, Billy, thank you for today's class. And thank you guys, everyone. And we will see you how many classes, like Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday. Yeah, I hope so. Well, I will also introduce one more teacher, and probably you will see Billy a couple more times. So thank you so much, and thank you, Billy, again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ooh, I'm pretty dark.